Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, founder and CEO at Riderflex. We hope you enjoy today's podcast. And as a reminder, please subscribe to the Riderflex show for updates on new episodes. And by the way, if you haven't already, check out the book we recently launched, The Riderflex Guide, Inspiring and Hiring, available for purchase on Amazon. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
Hey,
There he
Steve,
is. How
good to
are
see
you, man?
buddy. I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Excellent. Are you still going? You still doing the games? Are you still getting into the? You're still doing
It's funny. It's funny. A lot of people say to me, "You still doing the games?" And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, 35 years, same thing. Hasn't
Wow.
changed. Hasn't changed one iota in all that time.
Have you
Except
ever try to sneak people in? You ever try to? You're like, yeah, he's with me. Yeah, she's with me. Or you get people in.
I tried to sneak my daughter in a couple of weeks ago, and they stopped me, and they made me. And someone hooked me up with a pass, but like they're much tighter than they used to be on bringing people in.
I mean, the people watching the gate. Are you like, yo, bro? I've been here like 35 years. Who do you think
They
you're
don't
talking
care. First of all, here's the reality of my situation. I'm a stat keeper. I'm not very important, and people don't. I'm gonna plug my microphone, and I forgot. But people, we're kind of like we're just supposed to show up and do our job perfectly, and nobody, we don't get a lot of attention, which is fine. I'm used to it. And they've also ruined our seats. They moved us into a different seat actually, and it's much further up because they. Can you hear me now? Is this thing better?
Oh yeah, it's working. Yeah, you're totally good.
Oh wait, hold on.
Yeah, testing.
I just lost. Hold on one sec.
Okay,
I lost you for some reason.
no worries.
Hold on. What happened here?
Test.
Hello?
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, got it. Yeah, it's weird. When I plugged in my microphone, I lost the audio from you, but now it's back. Anyway.
No worries. No worries. Your seats now. So let's see. Are you? I think you told me last time you're out in the crowd, right? So you can hear the crowd. Is that right?
Yes, we're 25 rows up. We're on the side. We're not even in the middle. We're basically have to sit next to the TV broadcasters and the radio guys so we can give them stats all the time.
Oh, I see. All right.
So,
Can you hear?
Yeah.
So you can hear like the broadcasters, like right here. You can hear him talking and all that.
So yeah, and last night they played the Nets, and we don't like the Nets too much, Ben Simmons and all that, and so there was fans right behind us yelling about the game, and like we're trying to like do our job, and there's like literally they're 6 inches behind my feet. It's kind of ridiculous, but
yeah, that part I couldn't do that. I mean, you just nailed the #1 reason why I won't go to concerts with my wife anymore. I told her. I can't remember the last one we went to. It was a few years back. I don't know. She took me like Tim McGraw or something. And I told her, I was like, that's it. I'm done. I can't. It's because somebody behind me, beside me, they're going to bother me the whole time. I can't do it. It was the same. We went to a movie theater. This is way before COVID. Leonardo DiCaprio was in the one with the bear almost eats him or whatever. Which one?
Oh yeah, I didn't see that. I remember that one though.
Anyway, same thing. Middle of that movie, I get up. I told her, I was like, I can't. I'm done. Like I'm retired from movie theaters. People is no, I know the shit out of me. So I can't imagine you sitting there the whole game with somebody in your ear. Do you have
we do.
Okay.
It's not terrible. I mean, it's just a little annoying, but like we have headsets and we have like 5 people that are on the headset. So one guy actually calls out the action to us and we input it into the computer, me and my partner. Right. So
you ever turn around? You ever be like, hey man, shut the fuck up, bro. Like be quiet. But you ever
No, I wanted to last night. It was worse last night than usual, but I didn't sit. No, I mean, literally, they paid good money for those seats. Like,
I
it's
guess.
not their fault. They,
Yeah.
they should be able to drink beer and make noise if they want. It's all
Okay.
good.
So they sell beer.
Yeah, yeah. The people are every once in a while, someone's behind us, clearly drunk and saying stupid stuff. How sports fans get, and
Oh, yeah.
but the Sixer fans are passionate, and I love Sixer fans, so I'm not going to complain about that.
And how about this is your year for the Eagles, I guess, huh? Right? I mean, we're recording this, by the way, for the listeners on January 26th. So we're right before, is the championship weekend coming up? I'm trying to remember.
NFC Championship game is in South Philadelphia on Sunday.
You going?
I'm not going. I'm staying right here in my house. I'm having some friends over. I'm not going.
I think, I mean, I haven't followed football a lot this year for various reasons, but I think this is probably your year, right? I mean, I'd be surprised if they don't win it.
I think we're favored, which is, we're the number one team most of the season, but anything can happen on a playoff game. But yeah, we are. It's been a really good season. We're really fired up here, and the city of Philly gets so excited when anyone does well. The Phillies made a run to the World Series, and everybody was fired up for a couple weeks, and now we're fired up for the Eagles. It's a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
Your fans are traditionally and historically, what's the word? Intense.
Yeah, passionate, intense. Some would say obnoxious, but very good fan base, and we just love. It's like there's this expression. It's a Philly thing. Like if you live here, like you just love Philly sports, and everybody else, it's like Philly versus everybody.
Yeah.
That's the other expression. We kind of
I
like that.
I
Yeah,
remember growing up. I lived in southern Oklahoma growing up, which Oklahoma doesn't have a pro team. So if you grew up in southern Oklahoma, most of the time you were a Cowboy fan for the most part because it was like the closest team. And man, I remember like playing Philly was not fun.
yeah. No,
But anyway,
no one wants to play
uh,
here. Yeah. How are you doing, man?
I'm hanging in there. We're doing good. Yeah, yeah. Riderflex is a great year for us,
Good.
for us, like 70% increase over last year for our recruiting firm for the listeners. In case anybody's listening to this particular episode and needs help with staffing and recruiting, you can always give us a buzz. Yeah, wonderful year. Feeling super blessed. Very thankful that we had a great year. How
Good.
about you,
Happy to
man?
hear that.
What's good? Give me the latest on Scott Berman and the Panther Group and anything else that's going on. What's the latest?
Sure. So I can't say it was a great year for me and us in 2022. I'm always give it to everybody straight. It was a challenging year, and I think for a couple of reasons. First of all, the money coming into cannabis has really slowed up a lot,
Big time.
and so that's affected our venture fund. So a lot of our portfolio companies have had trouble raising additional capital.
Yeah.
So their growth has slowed. Some of them are doing really well, some aren't, like with any venture fund. But the ones that are trying to take that next step and raise the next round and maybe have an exit, they've kind of stalled a little bit.
Why do you think that is? Let's talk about it. Yeah, go into,
Sure.
and I think you're right. So for the listeners, 2023, January 26, 2023, yeah, it has slowed. What are your thoughts on all of that, Scott? Why do you think that is?
I have a lot of theories. So first of all, there's a couple of main theories have happened. Number one is federal regulation has not helped. Nothing has happened. And when Biden won the White House and the Democrats controlled the Senate and House, everybody thought this is going to be great for cannabis.
Right.
We're gonna get our safe banking bill. We're gonna get other bills, descheduling and things like that. And 2 years have gone by and absolutely nothing happened. Right at the end, they tried to jam the safe banking bill into an omnibus spending bill in the lame duck Congress. And Mitch McConnell said no. And then they were like, all right, forget safe banking. So it was disappointing. I mean, not, and so I think there was anticipation that things would be, further along there. So that's one issue that's greatly affected us. The second thing is that the early investors in cannabis businesses, both public and private, have not made enough money. And you know how those things go. Like you invest in a fund, the fund does well, returns capital, and then they go fund 2 and fund 3, and then they reinvest at a higher number, and you go to a $30 million fund. very few VCs have done that well in the space. And so a lot of money from the individual investors has really slowed up
Yep.
because they haven't cashed in. There haven't been enough exits. It's really hard for companies to go public. And so that's another factor, is that, you have to get acquired to have a liquidity event pretty much.
Yep. Yep. And the ones that have gone public, several of the ones that have gone public, the stock has done this.
That's really one of the biggest factors. And here's I call it the CNBC factor, because when you follow cannabis on CNBC, if you're not in it every day like I am, you follow, there's 10 stocks that everybody talks about. Tim Seymour is a great guy. He does a lot of good reporting on cannabis, and they bring up Curaleaf and GTI and Ascend Wellness. And those stocks had a terrible year. They were all off a tremendous amount. And so for people on the outside looking in, they feel like cannabis is not doing well because the stocks are getting pummeled. And they're right in some respects. Like, you can't make money at those stocks right now. However, if you look into it a little deeper, a lot of those companies are actually generating significant revenue. They're generating EBITDA. They're borrowing money at decent rates, and they're growing their footprints all over the country.
But their debt, but a lot of the debt's high, right?
Yes, the debt is definitely a problem, but that's okay. That happens in business cycles. Like, a lot of these companies are actually generating really significant revenues, and that's good. And the other thing, we will get to the positive news in a second, Steve. There is positive news, but I think that people are kind of looking at it on the surface and saying, the cannabis sector is not doing well, and the government isn't helping, so I'm going to put my money elsewhere.
Okay. Yeah, I see that. Drilling down on the stock deal, I had an interesting conversation with somebody about Charlotte's Web, or CW Hemp. I don't know what's the stock symbol under. I can't remember, but was having a conversation about how, they brought in that big CEO from Kellogg. I can't remember her name, and the stock is just, and it's almost a penny stock, like,
I know,
almost. And I'm like, and I remember when that was like a big deal. They were on CNN. Remember, they had the whole thing, and all this stuff. I was like, wow. And I'm like, man, how did that happen? I don't know how, does the is part of it oversaturation as well? Do you think there's just too many providers and companies? What are your thoughts about that?
So it's interesting. Every state has a different story. And that's what's an interesting thing about cannabis, is like, you have 38 different markets that all have a different evolution. And so in certain markets, there is clearly oversaturation. I'll give you one example, is Oregon, which it was one of my first investments in Oregon 7 years ago. But basically, there's way too many people growing cannabis in Oregon. The quality's good, and there's not that many people there. And so the market, the price per pound has really crashed. It's really hard to make money as a cultivator unless you're growing it super efficiently. And, if you're a store owner, I went out there one time and a guy said to me, I have 10 people a day coming in trying to sell me flour. And I can, and I pick out the best flour and tell the other 9 to go away. And so if you're making, it's really hard to sell enough product to make money there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. When I was back in Oklahoma, so I went to Oklahoma for Thanksgiving to see my family. That's where I was raised, and my mom still lives there. And I'm driving in a town called Chickasha, Oklahoma, which is southwest of Oklahoma City. And I think there's probably, 20,000 people there. I must have counted like 15 or 20 pot shops. I'm like,
yeah.
And I got out to my mom. My mom lives kind of out in the country. I got out to my mom's place. I'm like, there's not enough people here to sustain that many stores. I can promise you these stores are not going to last.
Yes. Well, Oklahoma is the #1 example of oversaturation, because they made it super easy to get a license, real low barrier and low cost. And they didn't put a cap on it. They really need to put caps on licenses and regulate it better. But, a lot of people want to get into the cannabis business. It's kind of an interesting, sexy business for lots of people. And frankly, a lot of them aren't really qualified to deal with it
True.
especially when there's a lot of competition and you have to be really, on it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I
Yeah.
think, what do you see happening as we move forward? I mean, I have my own thoughts on it, but you're more of an expert on the topic than me. I mean, do you just see a lot of these little people falling out?
Yeah.
Do you see, I mean, are these big giant companies like Philip Morris just waiting around for the Fed to lift the rules so they can just come in and knock everybody out? What do you think's going to happen?
I think both of those things are going to happen. Definitely a lot of smaller operators, we're already seeing it, are in distress. There's a lot of restructuring going on, and there's a lot of companies that aren't going to make it. It's unfortunate. There's a lot of M&A activity. There's smart operators. I'm involved with a new project where they're looking to acquire retailers in different states, and they're buying them at a very good multiple, a very low multiple, like half of what it was a year ago. And so there's a lot of operators that are tired and frustrated and they want to take chips off the table. And so if you have a good plan and a good, you can roll things together now. And that's on both the dispensary side, but also we're seeing it on the ancillary side. There was a fintech merger that happened recently, and then there's a lab merger that we're talking about, rolling labs together and putting them under one company. And so I think that trend's going to continue.
By the way, speaking of the labs, I don't want to go down too far of a rabbit hole here, and I don't want to make fun of any of my lab friends, but I love how a lot of these cannabis companies, they're trying to rebrand themselves, Life Biosciences, all these fancy bullshit terms, and several of them, I'll get calls or whatever. I'm looking at the website, I'm like, what is this? Like, this is a cannabis company. Like, stop
Right.
stop dicking around. Like, don't try to
Right.
fake it out.
Right. I know.
I mean, I get it. They're trying to. I don't know what they're trying to do, but it. Anyway.
Yeah.
I hope none of your.
I've met those guys too.
They're always.
Yeah.
Well, what about this whole CBD bubble? I guess is the
Yeah.
right word.
Well, yeah.
Go for it.
Well, I just want to actually go back 1 second and talk about the Philip Morris thing you brought up.
Oh yeah,
because
go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get us off track. Yeah,
No,
go
that's
ahead.
cool. Because I think that's an important subject, because I do think that there are a lot of companies that are on the sidelines right now. They're waiting for federal regulation, number one, but they're also waiting for it to get big enough to be interesting.
Uh-huh.
And so, to a Philip Morris, if you're doing 5 or 10 million a year in revenue, you're not that interesting.
No,
If
well,
you're
they're just gonna run those people out of business. They'll just buy the top 3 or 4 or 5 outfits and crush everybody else.
Right. So I still see that happening, and hopefully it'll happen sooner rather than later. I mean, not that they're crushing everybody, but that they come in and we would like to see some exits come. So I think that there are a lot of different industries, certainly the healthcare space. There's companies eyeing cannabis businesses, and there's the technology, the SaaS platforms. So I foresee that if we got some regulation in DC and some things get bigger and better, I think you're going to see that trend play out. I hope.
You're right about the whole Biden thing when the Democrats won the White House, right? I kind of forgot about that. Everybody was like, "Oh man, it's going to go super fast now." You're right. I hadn't thought about it till you mentioned it. Like, yeah, I guess nothing has happened. And now, I mean, I don't know if anything will. It feels like it's stalled out. I don't know.
Well, I'm an optimist, Steve, and I look at things with a positive spin. And so there are quite a number of Republicans that are actually in favor of this stuff moving forward. One of them is Nancy Mace of South Carolina. She's a very big proponent. I've heard that the House Rules Committee is filled with few people that are supportive of safe banking. And so there is a chance, it's not necessarily the most clear-cut bipartisan issue. It's not, like other issues. I look at it as more an old versus young politician issue. And I'm not picking sides, but I'm saying we might need some younger people, in the Senate.
You're right.
Yeah,
you're right. It's not just the Democrats backing it. I mean, we'll go back to Oklahoma to use as an example. Oklahoma is one of the most red states in the country.
Right.
And they were one of the first states to pass it. I was like, whoa, I was actually surprised by that. So,
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, it's not just Democrats. The
So
the Philip Morrises of the world and stuff, are they going to, do you see them combining forces with big ag and huge giant agriculture farming companies, families, and just, I don't know, taking over the entire crop across the US? Will there be any small people left? Will it turn into a microbrewery? Like, oh, Steve's little microbrewery grow in Loveland, Colorado. We can visit that, but that's tiny. Is that what'll happen?
I think so. I think what you'll see, a couple things. There will be small microbrewery type folks out there that are doing craft cannabis. I think that will never go
Okay.
away. But I do think the big grows, the huge operations will get absorbed by either big ag or, a Philip Morris. But there's also the overseas factor. I
Yes.
believe that, I'm working on a project in South America now where they're building a humongous facility and they're going to be able to export cannabis around the world. So just, I think that's going to be a trend there. And I think, a big grow in the USA, it's going to be harder over time to
Agreed.
grow it cost efficiently.
No doubt about it. Isn't this going to be interesting? How about the giant illegal grows that are down in wherever, Colombia or whatever, and the right regulations get passed and poof, all of a sudden hey, we're a real business.
I know.
And now we're just shipping in product to the US. This is cool.
I don't know if you ever saw the show Narcos.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yep.
I thought the original Narcos, when they went back in time and they showed the marijuana guy that
Yes.
that
Yes.
grew those fields, I was fascinated by that, like how they started off with marijuana for a long, long time, and they weren't happy with enough money, and they switched to other things. But like that, I think they're gonna do it again. I've been hearing that they're growing a lot more cannabis down there, and
Yep.
they're trying to actually, some of them are trying to actually build legitimate regulated businesses.
Because they know, yeah, and they're trying to just stay out of jail long enough for the laws to change so they can be real business.
Well, it was also one thing that was really interesting during that thing is like the head guy was saying, I want to get into cocaine and whatever. And the other guy's like, just stick with marijuana. Nobody cares about us growing
Nobody
weed.
cares.
But the minute we
That's right.
start shipping cocaine
Yes.
across the border, the
Yep.
feds are going to come. And that was what happened. It's
That's
like,
what happened. Yeah. That's what
yeah,
happened.
it's an interesting story.
We are very similar to what happened with alcohol. I mean, a lot of people forget, a lot of people, young people don't even know. I mean, I bet the average millennial doesn't even know how prohibition worked or how
Yeah.
alcohol was legal, then was illegal, then legal again. Right. And so can you
Yeah.
imagine what Adolf Coors and all these guys were doing back then? They're like, what the fuck? Okay, we're making this stuff.
Yeah.
Now we can't make it. Now we're going to secretly make it, but we got to stay alive long enough so that when this thing gets good, then we got to go back in business.
And we got to deal with the mafia,
That too.
Yeah.
By the way, I was going to ask you, not to be a conspiracy theorist, but do you think that's some of the reason that the Fed and the government do you think the black market guys and girls are lobbying behind the scenes to keep it from becoming legal? Do you think that's possible, or is that too much of a conspiracy theory?
I think that's possible. I definitely do. Yeah. And I think that that's a big problem because the black market is still very much alive in many markets.
Yes.
California operators are struggling because probably 50% of the market is still in the gray area. Even though there's 30 million people, whatever, it's still a problem. And I know a lot of legacy black market operators that don't want legalization to happen because
I'm sure
they're
they
making a
don't.
lot more money. Yeah. So it's a problem. And then there's the tax rate. So each individual state has a different tax structure. And by the way, another challenge that we have in the industry is this 280E tax rule, which is
Yes.
really, that would be a huge boon to the industry if they were to fix that, because everybody's profits would go up and a lot more of these operators would be in better shape. So, that's a big problem all across the board, but each state has a different tax law. And so certain states, it's tougher for the regulated operators to make a profit. And,
Yes.
you hope that, but it's different everywhere. So it's hard to say.
Yeah, people that don't know that the tax burden makes a brick and mortar retail outfit. It makes it very difficult to make it, and especially if you're not growing your own product. If you're just
Yeah.
wholesale buying product and you're running one little retail store, good luck.
It's really hard. Yeah.
Very, very
Yeah.
difficult. Here's an interesting question. I had this one that I wrote down for you ahead of time. I was curious about this. In any state where recreational and medicinal are both passed and legal, how many states is that now that are both? I should know the answer.
19 or 20, I think.
Okay. Should every person in prison for a non-violent cannabis offense be let out in those states?
Yes, 100%. Yes. It's
Pretty much, that's a no-brainer, right? For me, that's a no-brainer. I'm like, why? Like, what? How come? Why hasn't somebody done that? I don't understand. What are we waiting on? I mean, there are people sitting in jail for something that everybody else is doing right
I
now.
know.
It's kind of fucked up.
It's terrible. You're right. It's a shame, and we've ruined people's lives. And you know what? 85 to 90% of them are minority.
That's right.
You know, African American, Hispanic, and it's really not fair. It was completely unfair. It's disproportionately affected that population.
Yes.
A lot of young men ruined their lives when they were in their teens and 20s. Right. And you know, there's a lot of good people in this industry that are advocating for. There's a thing called the Last Prisoner Project, which is a nonprofit. Yeah, and their job, you know, basically what it says: we want to keep working till every single person is out of jail that was locked up for cannabis. And they've made a lot of progress, but there's still people sitting there today. It's a shame.
And is part of that follow the money trail, because these towns that operate with these prisons and the whole economy and the money that's involved, I mean, that's got to be tied to it. Has to be.
It's definitely tied to it. And there's certain states that are actually doing a good job with this. One of them is New York State, which they have a program where legacy operators are getting funding and a head start on getting into the cannabis space. People that had been arrested, or a family member was arrested for something, now they're trying to give them the early crack at licenses, so they can get. In fact, I'm actually involved with this thing called the Just Us Foundation.
Okay.
It's kind of a new project, a great team of people in New York, and they're helping legacy operators get through the approval process of getting licensed and being licensed operators and regulated, and it's really great. It's
what's the URL? What's the website for that?
You know what? It's Just Us Foundation, but it is
something else.
It's like a. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to look it up.
That's okay. No,
there's like you know why? Because there's like a period. I think it's justus.foundation.
Okay. Yeah. For the listeners, I want to make sure they know about that.
Yeah. Justus.foundation.
Okay. Very good.
It's great.
Yeah.
Cheryl Mary Powell runs it. She's a huge, a great advocate for cannabis, an attorney from New York, and doing great work there.
You know, it's so weird. So my wife's family lives in Missouri and my family lives in Oklahoma, but my wife and I live in Colorado, right? So, well, every time we go to see our families, whether we're headed to Oklahoma or Missouri, we're going through Kansas. And so every time, and maybe this is because of, I grew up when it was illegal, right? I'm 55, and I grew up in a world where you were constantly, looking around trying to make sure.
Right.
And so we'll be getting the camper ready, or the car or whatever. And I always tell my wife, I'm like, okay, what do you got in the car? What do we got in the camper? What's where? How much do we have with us? I still get paranoid about it. I don't know why. Maybe I shouldn't, but I'm like, we're going through Kansas. I don't want to be locked up in Hutchinson, Kansas with the farmers or whatever. I don't know.
Better to be safe than sorry.
But what was my point? Oh, my point was, I just think it's absurd that well, I even have to think that way, right? Like, and then you go down to Oklahoma, and I got all these people are in jail when there's like 20 pot shops on Main Street.
It's really, and when you think back about how this all started, which started in 1996 when California went to medical cannabis, it's like that's a long time ago at this point, and the fact that you can't get, you can get arrested in Kansas, but you can buy legal weed in 20 states if you're over 21. It's really, it makes no sense. I know. It's stupid. It's
What was
stupid.
those? They still have states with dry counties, don't they, for alcohol? Don't they? Is that still, maybe Kansas is one of those, or was it Texas? Remember how when we were kids, when we were younger, we had those dry counties, we'd go across the county and there was a bunch of like 5 liquor stores. We'd buy what
Yeah.
we wanted and drive back.
We have one in Ocean City, New Jersey. I go to the Jersey Shore a lot in the summer, and there's a town with no alcohol, no bars, and you'd have to drive over the bridge to get booze, you know. But and here's another thing that's been really interesting, and there is good news. I like to stay positive in
Yeah,
some.
let's do it.
So the Northeast is good news, and
Okay.
what's happening here is really important for the industry in general,
Okay.
because you have New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Maryland that have just recently flipped from medical to adult. They're in the process of getting going. That's going to be a huge 30 to 40 million people are now going to have that access to adult use. You
Nice.
have Maine and Vermont, which are now doing well as adult use states. You have Virginia, which has it, I think, for like next year or something like that. And so you're now the entire Northeast is getting going. It's the first inning, second inning in a lot of these places.
That's
And when
great.
you look at the West Coast, you got California, Oregon, Nevada, Arizona. They're all thriving, big adult use states, and there's a lot of money being, made and transacted there. It's going to happen here. And I think that what's going to be interesting is I do think that's going to put pressure on the government, the federal government, to make more changes, because once New York City has weed shops everywhere, and I believe it's going to put a lot of pressure on Pennsylvania. We're sitting here right in the middle of adult use states, and we're just medical. So I think we may flip to adult use coming up soon. So I think that's going to kind of change the outlook in about one to 3 years from now.
Great point. You're right. When the Northeast goes, that's probably that's the final stage. I used to have a boss that lived in New York, and I lived in Oklahoma and Texas at the time. When I'd go see him in New York and we'd travel to New York, the Northeast states for retail, he'd always tell me, he's like, look, man, he goes, this is the original 13 colonies up here. This is where the real business is. You guys are just playing around west of the Mississippi. My point is the Northeast is, you got all the population. That's where the action is. Once it falls, who knows what'll happen. What do you think about psilocybin? What's going on with mushrooms long term? Any thoughts there?
Oh, I got a lot of thoughts there. I'm actually involved with a psilocybin project as an investor. I think it's a very exciting field, and I think there's two sides of it. There's definitely the biotech route. So psilocybin, low dose psilocybin for ailments, for depression, for PTSD, for anxiety. I think there's a lot more people microdosing now that are really getting into it. I think it has tremendous benefits that we don't fully understand yet. And I think we need to educate people, but I think there's just a lot of people out there that are taking some sort of medication that if they switch to psilocybin, it'd be safer and better. And I really believe in it. And it's tricky though, because it's certainly something that could be misused.
Yep.
And it could lead to bad consequences in certain cases if you're not really, if you take too much, obviously, it could be a problem. And if you're not in the right mindset, it could be a problem. But under a controlled and regulated situation, I think it's exciting. And I think that Colorado, you guys legalized psilocybin there recently. I believe Oregon is another place where it's decriminalized. And so I think you're going to start to see a lot more clinics, retreats. There's people building like retreats where you go and have a guided psilocybin trip. And I think it's very exciting.
I do too. And I think there's a lot of business opportunity right there. I totally agree. Shamans, is that what they call the guide that watches over you? What's it called? I can't remember.
I think there's different terms, but a shaman is kind of the extreme version, but yeah.
Okay. I think there's business opportunity for professionals that guide you and retreats. Yes. And I think there's, I couldn't agree more. In fact, I'm surprised more of those have not popped up. I have been personally invited several times to travel That's the word that I hear. And a good friend of mine over here, he's like, come on, man. He's like, you come over. He's got a yurt in his backyard. He's the whole thing. And I just I haven't got the courage to do it yet. For whatever reason, I'm nervous about it. I'm like, man, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I want to do something that I have to have somebody watch over me. Like, is it that dangerous? Oh, you're making me nervous. He's like, well, I'll have somebody watch over you. I'm like, really? Is it that? I don't know. You're scaring me.
So, well, first of all, I have two suggestions and comments on that. Number one is always read up and do research on this stuff before you try it. You know, there's two things. One is I'm sure most people know about the Michael Pollan book, How to Change Your Mind. And it was also a Netflix special. So I think that's a very educational program. There's also a documentary called Fantastic Fungi, which is fascinating. Paul Stamets is a guy that's well known in the psilocybin world, and he's been researching. And I learned so much about mushrooms in that documentary. So I think it's important to like read up and learn about it before you do anything, and just make sure it's right for you. That's number one. Number two is start small. You know, don't go taking 3-4 grams your first time. And I started on that road taking a half a gram of psilocybin, and then I took a gram one time, and then and so like you learn your own tolerance. For me personally, everyone's different. It's a really nice and wonderful experience. It's never been scary for me, but I've always had the right mindset, and the right set and setting are really important. So you need to be with the right people that you trust, and you need to be in a setting that's conducive. And then, it's definitely not for everyone, but for most people that I hang out with, it's very positive experience.
Better than cannabis? Would you, if you were going to be on an island for 45 days on vacation, and you could take cannabis or psilocybin, what are you taking?
That's a really good question, Steve. I would say for the last 30 some years, I would have said cannabis immediately. But the last year or two, I'm sort of thinking that psilocybin might be better in some ways. I don't know.
Okay, interesting.
I'll get back to you in a year or two on that, but it's a great question. And I think about it too, because sometimes, the thing about psilocybin is like, it's, cannabis, you could smoke a joint or smoke a bowl and be, still just, go do what you need to do. If you take a fair amount of psilocybin, you're not going to want to, you're not going to want to be out there doing normal stuff, I would say. So it's a different kind of experience.
Gotcha. Okay, very good. Well, I need to step out. I need to journey. I need to do soon. I'm kind of ashamed to admit that I haven't yet, because I've been kind of wimpy about it. I'm going to go to, I hope I'm going to go on an Alaska tour where I have a friend that lives up there that does Alaskan tours, takes you out in the bush, drops you off in a helicopter, hike out for 4 days, whatever.
Nice. That's awesome.
And he's got, what he does is he has a guide. He has a couple of guides that go with the group so that you can experience and travel with psilocybin, but there's somebody watching over you or whatever, I remember him telling me, he's like, hey man, he's like, the first time you do mushrooms, don't do it in the woods by yourself.
No, definitely not. No,
not a good idea.
A small amount and do it with friends. And, the first time I actually started doing this stuff, I was at concerts, at music festivals.
Okay.
And I was with like 15 of my close friends, and I took a half of a half. I'm like, give me whatever you're taking. I'll take a quarter of that or a half of that, and let's see how it goes. And gradually I realized it went well.
Okay. Yeah. Pretty cool. How about, are you doing some alcohol with it? Is that okay? Will you have a drink with it, or you stay away from that? Or
no, I'll have a drink with it, but I won't drink much. I wouldn't drink a lot of it. I also think that it's what's really interesting too is I think that psilocybin can be very beneficial for people that are well. Like Michael Pollan has this expression, the betterment of well people. So people that are, things are going okay, their life is okay, and now they want to just, get to some other level or whatever. That's one, type of person. But it also can be very effective for people that have issues, mental issues, and PTSD issues, and end of life. Actually, they're giving it to people that are terminally ill to come to grips with their death, and things like that. So, it depends on where you're at in your life, and I would just recommend getting advice from people that are experienced and then taking it slowly.
Very good. So, I want to ask about CBD.
Sure.
I'll give you my commoner, outsider, ignorant view of it, and you can tell me where I might be off
Sure.
base. Even as a recruiting firm 3 or 4 years ago, I just, over the years, everybody in Colorado, it seems like everybody I met in Colorado was going to start a CBD company, or they had a CBD brand, right? It was like everybody's got a CBD brand. And my CBD is the best CBD, or what was the word?
Right.
My CBD is full spectrum and all this
Right.
other shit. And CBD, rub CBD on everything. Rub CBD on your knee. Your arthritis is going to cure this. It's going to cure that. It's like it's the miracle thing, and that has seemed to taper off a little.
Yes.
What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, a lot of people call me up and say, something's wrong and I need CBD. What do you recommend? And the first thing I say is, I am not a doctor. I mean, I don't know. You know what I mean? Don't ask me, ask your doctor. But, it's true. It's a tough spot because there are so many products out there and it's really hard to know what is right. I mean, first of all, again, research is important. I mean, you need to look up and see, how it's made. And, the full spectrum is definitely a thing, and better than when it's not. But you also just have to look at what I like to see is there clinical research that's been done on this product? So one of the companies I started working with recently is a U.S. distributor for an Israeli firm. That's is actually one of the guys that originally found CBD in the cannabis plant in Israel. They've been doing a lot of research and clinical trial there for many years.
Okay.
They unfortunately in our country we outlawed research for a long time, so we don't really, and we haven't regulated it. The FDA has yet to weigh in on regulating CBD, which is a problem.
Yep.
But in Israel, they've been doing clinical trials for many years, and these products have been tested, and there's certain specific indications that they're good for. So is it good for pain? Is it good for sleep or anxiety? So that's a challenge there, and I think we have a long way to go.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of good stuff out there, but there's a lot of crap. I hate to say it out there as well.
I think there is. Yeah, I think there's a lot of crap. And I don't want to. And I got a lot of CBD friends that have been on the podcast. So I don't want them all to be mad at me. I haven't. Hey, I got arthritis pain, and I still have arthritis pain, and I've been rubbing all kinds of CBD on my neck for the last 2 years, and it's still there.
So two things. First of all, one really important note is you really should check with your doctor and also check interactions. This is something that some people don't talk about a lot, that CBD can interact poorly with things like blood thinners.
Oh.
And yes, I know. Most people, I didn't really know that.
I didn't know that. Oh.
I know. And so if you want to try CBD for something, and especially like an ingestible form of it, you should really just make sure, there's no other side effects. And, look, I think it's pretty amazing what CBD can do, but it's not good for everything. And so it really depends. One of the things that I've been working on, which is really interesting, is clinical adoption of CBD. And this is kind of a marketing project that I'm working on where, how like if you go to a doctor's office and you have a digestive issues and they hand you a sample of Metamucil and they say you should be on fiber, and they give you a sample pack,
which I am.
Right, me too. I love Metamucil, right?
I gotta take it. Yeah.
Us 50-year-old guys,
we're on it.
I don't mind admitting it. But what we're trying to do is get doctors. A lot of doctors don't, because again, back to there's not a lot of research. They don't know a lot about this and why and how CBD can be used instead of something else, like an NSAID or whatever, like an anti-inflammatory. So we're working on marketing CBD products to the doctor's office so that they will give out samples to their patients, and then also targeting the patients with the same messaging, like talk to your doctor about XYZ brand and use this for sleep instead of Ambien,
Okay.
So like, because this statistics, this makes a lot of sense. If a doctor recommends something, to you, you're going to be much more inclined to try it.
No doubt.
But the doctor's not going to do that unless they really, unless they look at clinical trials, they have continuing medical education, and they really know what's in it. And so if a doctor, we want like doctor recommended CBD.
It's so interesting you mentioned the doctor recommendation thing, and that affects older people greatly that grew up with Richard Nixon telling them that it was the devil weed and all this other shit.
Exactly.
I mean, I use my own mom for an example. She, when I saw her at Thanksgiving, she's been having all kinds of pain with some stuff. And she's like, well, the doctor's got me on this tramadol. And I was like, Mom, tramadol is an opioid. It's a light opioid, but it's an opioid and it is addictive. It's, it's not the worst one. She goes, what is that? What do you mean? What do you mean? Oh, what do you mean addictive? I'm like, yeah. I go, well, how many are you taking? She goes, I'm taking like 100 milligrams a day, a couple of times a day. I said, what? I said, okay. All right. I said, she goes, well, sometimes I take one at night, then I get up in the middle of the night, take another one. I'm like, Mom, okay. First of all, it's not a sleeping pill. Okay. So stop taking it for sleep. It's a pain pill. Secondly, I want you to ask the doctor about cannabis. If you want to sleep, if you're looking for something to take to help you sleep better, I want you to try cannabis. Tramadol is a pain pill, not a sleeping pill, is what I told her.
Yep.
And I'm not like an expert doctor. I just based on what I know. And she said what you just said. She's like, well, I'll ask my doctor, and if he recommends, it's exactly what she said. She would not. She's like, I'm not taking anything unless my doctor recommends it. She wasn't just going to go off of my word. So you're right. The doctors have got to be comfortable and they got to be knowledgeable and then comfortable recommending these other things, whether it's cannabis, CBD, psilocybin, whatever. And that will help a lot of people, a lot of old school, religious, conservative, grew up in the 60s. They're not going to try it unless the doctor says it's okay.
I have I'll tell you a quick mom story because I'm proud of my mom. What she is a cancer survivor, 3 different types of cancer. Wow. 5 or 6 years ago, I said to her, ask your doctor about cannabis. The doctor said, I don't know anything about it. I don't, can't recommend it. I don't want to deal with it, basically blew it off. So I actually I hired a nurse for a consultation from California, the Cannabis Nurses Association. I said, Mom, just listen to this woman. So the woman, we get on the phone, my mom sends her medical records. She goes, Mrs. Berman, if you lived out here, we would have had you on cannabis years ago. You should definitely, use cannabis for different things, whatever. So we hang up the phone. My mom goes, all right, I'm ready to try it, but I can't, where can I get that stuff she was talking about? And I said, Mom, I'll be over in a half hour. I'll bring you this stuff. She's like, you have those vape pens? I'm like, yeah, I do. I'll bring you one, right? So 5 years later, my mom's been on Rick Simpson oil. I started getting it from her. I would fly to, when I came back from Colorado, I would bring her Rick Simpson oil. And she really likes it. And now, but then eventually PA got medical marijuana. She's got a card. Right. She just called me the other day and said, I'm out of my Rick Simpson pills. Can you find them somewhere? And so, it's like she's a happy cannabis patient, but it didn't come from her doctor. It came from her son, who was a cannabis guy. And I got an opinion from a different state. That also shows you that in different places, it's much more accepted based on the regulations, because it's not. Totally. So I think that the more it spreads into different states, the more doctors and healthcare professionals are going to pay attention to it.
Agreed. Yep. Totally agree. Well, tell me, let's wrap it up. What's going on with Panther Group? Give me is that still your main gig? What are you guys doing? What's the latest? What do you want to talk about? What do you want to pitch us on? Or what do you want to inform us about?
Yeah. So Panther Group is doing a lot on the fundraising side, raising capital for businesses in the space, both debt and equity. Okay. And also providing business services. One of the more exciting parts of what Panther's done is build a database, several large databases. One is cannabis businesses, about 120,000 businesses, and we're providing like B2B lead gen services.
Oh, nice. That's a good move. Great move. Yeah. The
database is really powerful. And then we built it up. We have a data scientist and we built machine learning around it. And it's really exciting. The second database is also exciting. It's basically ingesting cannabis shopper data from point of sale platforms.
Okay.
So we're connected through an API with point of sale companies that are selling millions of dollars a day, and so we're pulling in audience data on who's buying what products, what prices they're paying, what's the competitors doing, and we're providing data services as an outsourced business. Most companies can't hire a data team, so we're helping them build price elasticity, inventory forecasting, demand, audience segmentation, like, you know, females who are buying vape pens, males who are buying pre-rolls by age, gender, and geo. And so there's a lot going on in the data space that's really exciting.
So, wow. So the Panther Group, by the way, for the listeners, thepanthergroup.co, data company, tech company, services company, investment company.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's
it. Yeah.
I love the diversity of the revenue streams. That's for sure.
Well, our theory all along, and this started from our venture fund. You know, we've been running the fund for 6 or 7 years, and we invested in a bunch of companies, and we started to be a little bit more involved with them and helping them, you know, get to the next level. And we realized, you know, funding is hugely important all the time, but after you get funded, you need, you know, sales and marketing support. You know, we bring in a fractional CFO. Or CMO in certain situations. I love, you know, you and I have talked about the recruiting. Like, a lot of these companies need to hire better talent, and so, you know, it's like, it's kind of just business advice and advisory services that are, and then they'll need more funding, and then also someday hopefully want an M&A transaction to happen. So, you know,
exactly.
So I know putting roll-ups together.
I know you're a co-founder. What's your functional responsibility that you manage? You know, what is Scott doing versus the other people involved?
I'm more on the higher level strategy side, bringing in new clients and building relationships. We have a team that's executing on a lot of this stuff, and I'm kind of like working on different projects and building bridges and also working with a lot of vendors, you know, to really get to, you know, so if we go into a company and we say, you know, here's who you should be talking to about your HVAC system or your software for your dispensary, and sort of helping people, like, you know, build their businesses the right way. And also the other big thing is helping them grow into new markets. So I'm very, especially being out here in Philadelphia, like growing companies into the East Coast. You know, we talked about the East Coast getting going. A lot of companies out west that are not doing as well, they want to open up shop here. New Jersey, I have a great project in New Jersey that I'm working on, because I think that there's going to be a lot more activity here that we can bring seasoned operators in and really do well on this part of the country.
Very good, my friend.
Yeah.
Are you raising? I guess you're always interested in talking to investors. Is that right?
We're always raising. Always raising capital. We're, you know, and here's the interesting thing. And we started off the show talking about how fundraising has slowed down, but that hasn't slowed down the good opportunities.
Okay.
So if you're an investor that has been looking at cannabis on the sidelines, it is now a pretty good time to get into it. Okay. The valuations are down. There's not a lot of people rushing new money in, but if you have money, there's deals. There's good solid companies, there's good fundamentals. And, you know, I encourage people to, you know, think about it strongly now. You know, what's the Warren Buffett thing when, you know, I invest when the tide goes, when the tide goes out, you see who's swimming naked. And I think I messed that quote up a little bit, but like, you know, I know what it is. Invest when others are fearful, and when others are enthusiastic, then pull back.
Yes, it's true. No, yeah, I totally agree.
I think I messed that one up too, but you get the idea.
Yeah, I get the idea. Yeah, absolutely. The panthergroup.co. Scott, thank you very much. Super insightful. Great conversation, my friend. Appreciate you coming back to the Riderflex show and sharing.
I appreciate you, Steve. I always enjoy our conversations, and you have a great show, and I really would love to keep talking whenever we can. Thank you.